77 years after its release, Orson Welles' Citizen Kane is considered to be, by the American Film Institute, the greatest movie of all time. I agree with this statement because of the influential cinematic techniques used, exploration of the human psyche, and a non-linear narrative. The movie starts off when newspaper tycoon Charles Foster Kane, loosely based on William Randolph Hearst, dies while uttering a cryptic message, Rosebud. Journalists believe that the meaning of his last word will allow them to make sense of Mr. Kane's life. A reporter is sent to interview the people who knew Kane the best, including his wealthy but cold guardian, his second wife, who is a talentless opera singer, his butler, and Kane's two closest business partners. At only 26, Orson Welles is able to convincingly play Kane in many stages of his life. A brash and idealistic journalist, a scandal-plagued candidate for governor, and finally, a bloated, bitter old man. Everett Sloane is charming and humorous as Kane's business associate, Mr. Bernstein. Joseph Cotten convincingly plays Kane's one true friend, whose brutal honesty Kane's finds intolerable and so pushes him away. Finally, Dorothy Comingore successfully plays the annoying second wife of Kane, Susan Alexander. While possibly confusing to some, Welles and Mankiewicz's script enhances the themes of the movie by using a fragmented structure, using slow disclosure to build tension in the opening scene, and weaves in humor in an otherwise dark script. For example, when Jedediah Leland is interviewed, he seems more interested in comically sneaking a cigar into his hospital bedroom than talking to the recorder. The most influential aspect of Citizen Kane is the directing. Welles and cinematographer Greg Toland used deep focus to maximize the amount of information they could fit in each frame. Deep focus is when every part of the frame, the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, receive equal attention. This technique is shown when Kane's parents are discussing sending Kane away to live on the East Coast, while in the background, 3-year-old Kane is playing in the snow and enjoying himself. They also use backlighting to underscore the journalist's motivation to determine what Rosebud meant, and at some points in the movie, it appears that the camera has a mind of its own, as it will periodically look away from the characters and show the viewers details that the characters will never find out. The different cinematic techniques are complemented by composer Bernard Herrmann's film debut. Finally, the movie is just filled with cool shots. There's a shot of a screaming parakeet layered over a shot of Kane, a Spinal Tap-esque mockumentary-style opening, and a frequently imitated shot of Kane being reflected thousands of times. That last shot encapsulates one of the larger themes of the movie, where at the end of Kane's life, he reflects on the fact that he would have preferred to live a quiet, humbler existence. Orson Welles combines groundbreaking cinematic technique and an innovative script to reveal the motivations of a larger-than-life character, which is why Citizen Kane is one of the greatest movies of all time. At the movies, I'm Aaron Morris.
If you like classic movies and the thrill of suspense and betrayal, then Double Indemnity is the movie for you. Double Indemnity is directed by Billy Wilder and was released in April of 1944. In this classic film, insurance salesman Walter Neff, played by Fred MacMurray, gets roped into a murderous scheme when he falls in love with Phyllis Dietrichson, played by Barbara Stanwyck, who is trying to kill her husband, played by Tom Powers. Prompted by the late Mr. Dietrichson's daughter, Lola, played by Jean Heather, insurance investigator Barton Keyes, played by Edward G. Robinson, looks into the case and gradually begins to uncover the sinister truth. Fred MacMurray does a phenomenal job of playing the fraud hero, and Barbara Stanwyck plays Phyllis Dietrichson as a femme fatale, both staples of the film noir genre. I think that the dialogue in this movie really makes the movie good. Double Indemnity would not be the same without Fred MacMurray saying baby after every sentence he says to Barbara Stanwyck. There are some amazing ways you can find out the ending without even watching till the end. For example, when Mrs. Dietrichson walks down her stairs for the first time, you could see the resemblance of jail bars in the railings and in the Venetian blinds. That symbolizes that she's going to end up in jail or end up dead. She also appears as a double image in the mirror, and that symbolizes that she's a Two-Face. Another technique is how the movie is told. It starts out the way it ends, with Walter arriving at his office and telling the whole movie through the voice recorder. In the end, I think this is one of the best classic movies ever. Just the thrill of suspense and betrayal during the whole movie makes it one of the best. At the movies, I'm film critic Adam Lewer.
Fargo is an example of the 90s introducing powerful female leads to the screens. It makes you appreciate who and what you have. Directed and edited by the Coen brothers, Fargo is a black comedy that is darker than it is funny. William H. Macy plays slimeball car salesman Jerry Lundegaard, who arranges to have two crooks, played by Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare, kidnap his wife so he can secretly extort money from his wealthy father-in-law, played by Harvey Presnell. Everything goes south when the two execute a state trooper, and Frances McDormand, our lead, plays a pregnant cop who is tasked with solving the murder. Acting highlights range from McDormand's cheery attitude and friendly Minnesotan accent, and Macy's crooked behavior to Buscemi's shifty personality and Stormare's emptiness and fascination with the idiot's box. The script is riddled with Minnesotan speech like "yas," "ya thinks," and "you betchas" at random parts of the movie, making the setting of North Dakota and Minnesota all the more realistic. Symbols like Paul Bunyan with his trusty axe hint at the climax of the film, while others like the crossroads in the snow say in a meta way at what point the movie's at, and the jail bar like blinds telling us what kind of hell Jerry is headed for. Others like the infamous wood chipper represent a cleaning up of the story's loose ends as they are ground away. Overall, this crime drama will leave you in shock as you reach the end, making you appreciate who and what you have as you realize that there is more to life than just a little bit of money, like the love shared between the heroine and her husband. At the movies, I'm Ian Mo.
Set in the context of modern-day racial injustice in 2017, Jordan Peele's Get Out provides viewers with an unsettling story while also providing some much-needed social commentary. While Get Out may appear to be another generic horror movie, it is everything but that. The plot starts out simple enough. A young black man named Chris, played excellently by Daniel Kaluuya, is going to his white girlfriend's parents' house for a weekend to meet her family. Chris starts to notice things around the house and starts to realize that this is not a normal visit. The performances in this movie are not your typical horror movie tacky acting. Daniel Kaluuya expresses genuine fear and distress in a lot of the film's more intense moments. The chemistry between Kaluuya and Allison Williams, who plays Chris's girlfriend, is convincing and very realistic. Of course, this wouldn't be a Jordan Peele production without some comedy, and Lil Ray Howery does an amazing job as the comic relief of the film as Rod the TSA agent. The script is where Get Out truly shines. Upon rewatching this movie another time, it seemed like every word spoken had some sort of double meaning, such as the line about the groundskeepers that, quote, "When Grandma and Grandpa died, we couldn't bear to let them go." The direction of the film is just as powerful as the script. Each scene has weight and emotion behind it, and there's a heavy amount of symbolism in each shot of the film. Peele purposely constructs a shot down to the most minute details, such as the type of car that is being driven, deer antlers, costumes resembling the American flag, and the main character picking cotton in a pivotal moment of the plot. Not only is there a heavy amount of symbolism and great atmosphere, but there's also a large amount of foreshadowing that is only present during another viewing of the film. Instead of focusing on cheap jump scares like most horror movies, Get Out uses its disturbing tone and atmosphere to truly frighten the audience that will have you shaking in your seat. Get Out is a fantastic film. It is one of those movies that will be looked back on 20 years from now as inspiration on how to do horror right. Peele knocked it out of the park on his first try, and I can't wait to see what he does next. If you haven't seen it yet, then do yourself a favor and watch it a few times in order to experience this film in its full glory. At the movies, I'm film critic Mark Levito.
There's no doubt that Francis Ford Coppola is one of the greatest movie directors ever, and this movie, The Godfather Part 1, is clear evidence of that. If we look at the plot, we can see how the Corleone family is struggling to be the most powerful mafia in the 1940s in New York, which is led by Vito Corleone, played by the mighty Marlon Brando. In this picture, we will see the fall of very important members in the family and the rise of Michael Corleone, the little son of Vito, played by the great Al Pacino. Now, if we go to the technical aspect, we will find how the environment around the characters, such as fish or oranges, determine their situation or even their future. And now, when we talk about the fishes, there's one part when we see a fish's partner in a window when Brodsky gets killed, which we can interpret as in sleeping with the fishes. Now, if we look at the oranges symbol, we can see how it means danger. We can see that when Vito is playing with his grandson and he dies. What did he have in her mouth? An orange. We can appreciate how Coppola uses music and images to make the spectator aware about what's going on without the character actually speaking. In my opinion, this is the most mind-blowing Coppola's movie, and if you haven't watched it yet, I don't know what you are doing listening to me. At the movies, I'm Álvaro Aguiló.
In Jordan Peele's Get Out, Rose and Chris have reached a milestone in dating when you meet the parents. She invites him for the weekend getaway upstate with her parents. At first, Chris reads the family's over-accommodating behavior as nervous attempts to deal with their daughter's interracial relationship. But as the weekend progresses, a series of increasingly disturbing discoveries lead him to a truth that he never could have thought about. I liked this movie because it was a thriller. During the movie, it was very intense, going into all the different events leading up to when Chris was attacked. I also enjoyed this because each event was a mystery and it made me want to figure it out. For example, when Georgina unplugged Chris's phone, She did it because if she sees a camera flash, it would make her break out of her hypnotized trance. It's basically taking the power out of Chris's hands so he wouldn't flash the camera. On a symbolic level, this symbolizes how young African Americans use cell phone cameras to fight against police brutality. Also symbolic, Chris picks cotton out of the chair to put in his ears, symbolizing when slaves used to pick cotton. In my opinion, this movie shows more symbolism than other movies I've seen. At the movies, I'm Jared Khan.
The late 60s was a time of rebellious young adults, and Hollywood wasted no time in jumping along in the midst of all the action. Written by Buck Henry and Carter Willingham, The Graduate is easily acclaimed to be one of the greatest movies of the 60s era. The director, Mike Nichols, breaks more than one rule when it comes to film, causing stir amongst the critics. In the film, Benjamin Braddock, played by Dustin Hoffman, is concerned by what lies ahead in his future. Trouble comes his way as he is lured into the seduction of Mrs. Robinson, only to fall in love with her daughter Elaine, creating a more than unusual love triangle. Hoffman has awkward grunts and an uneasy flow of conversation, which does an excellent job in bringing his character to life. Anne Bancroft, who plays Mrs. Robinson, plays an amazing seductress as she uses more than just her eyes to trap Benjamin. The script writing itself is comedic gold as the audience will burst into laughter at the embarrassing situations Ben puts himself through. Nichols uses great directing tools as he uses jail bar wallpaper, creating the image that Ben feels trapped. Nichols also breaks barriers when he invades the frame with Ben's parents, symbolizing the oppression he feels from them. Lastly, from the fish tank to the swimming pool, Nichols adds a scuba diver throughout the movie, symbolizing that Ben feels as if he's drowning underwater. In my opinion, The Graduate is one of the greatest movies of its time due to its insane camera angles, the soundtrack of Simon and Garfunkel, and ability to connect to its audiences. At the movies, this is Juanita Williams.
If you were to Google the word vertigo, you would find definitions describing a physical sensation, symptoms of which include the feeling that the world around you is spinning. Alfred Hitchcock's 1958 film of the same name gives its audience that same feeling of dizziness and confusion, but in a wildly fascinating and thrilling way. The film follows retired detective John Scotty Ferguson, who suffers from a fear of heights, as he is hired by an old friend to investigate the perplexing paranormal activity of his wife, Madeline. As the investigation grows, so does Scotty's obsession with Madeline, and it is this obsession that leads to the eventual demise of his state of mind and concept of reality versus fantasy. It features James Stewart and Kim Novak as the starring roles, who both do an excellent job of conveying the star-crossed lovers of sorts. Stewart abandons the usual likable persona that he is used to playing to throw himself into the role of the perverse and depressed detective. He is really able to show his vulnerability, and it shows audiences his range and ability to portray vastly different types of characters, a sign of a truly brilliant actor. As an actress who had the difficult job of displaying a character with something deeper going on, Novak handles this beautifully. Audiences were able to see the subtle pain and hurt behind her laughs and smiles as she desperately vies for Scotty's love of both Madeline and Judy. The chemistry between the two is both frightening and impressive. The script itself is full of symbolism about the deeper meaning behind the film. The first two acts, though filled with slow, investigative scenes, elaborately spin a false narrative that entraps Scotty and the audience into a sense of security and delusion. In fact, any filmgoer could deduce from the two acts that Vertigo is a supernatural mystery about ghost possession. The third act, however, takes a turn that almost no one could see coming and leaves audiences spellbound and even slightly uncomfortable, as it introduces the idea of something scarier than demonic possession, a male need for possession. Yes, this film takes on the theme of the male gaze, and although Scotty suffers from a fear of heights, he has no problem perching at the very top of the patriarchal hierarchy, a place from which he can view his female counterpart as simply a sexual object. The concept of the male gaze permeated many of the films of the 1960s, but in Vertigo we see this concept pushed to its limits, as Scotty becomes obsessed with the exact appearance of his true love, therefore foregoing her thoughts and feelings. This film was a pioneer in many directorial effects, including the dolly zoom, which accurately emulated the feeling of vertigo Scotty experiences throughout the film. It was actually deemed the vertigo effect because of this film and has been used in future films like Jaws, Goodfellas, and Poltergeist. Hitchcock also visibly foreshadows Scotty's fate through his camera movement, often panning up to show the audience the bell towers in the background. Perhaps one of the most interesting devices Hitchcock employs is the use of color. He specifically plays with the two complementary colors, red and green, to represent reality and fantasy respectively. We see these colors displayed in costuming, scene composition, and set, and it makes it very clear that Scotty is trapped in a fantasy, or in this case, a world of green. As Madeline and Scotty kiss in a circling camera to the fantastical soundtrack of composer Bernard Herrmann, we see that there is no escaping for Scotty. These and many other directorial techniques are what made Hitchcock a true auteur. He was the primary creative force in all of his films, developing his own distinguishable creative style and putting so much thought into creating a flawless project. So much so that many of Scotty's obsessions and compulsions in this film are said to mirror Hitchcock's same actions while directing, and Vertigo is considered to be his most personal film. It's clear that Vertigo is a truly chilling film that leaves audiences feeling excitingly bewildered as they ponder their own senses of fantasy and delusion. At the movies, this is Jayla Creekmer.